David Sterling was a man who believed that everything in life could be quantified, controlled, and secured. As a self-made tech tycoon, his world was built on algorithms and data. But 3 years ago, a rain-slicked highway stripped away that control, leaving his 12-year-old son, Leo, paralyzed from the chest down. David's mansion, once a symbol of success, became a high-tech fortress. He spent millions on therapy, but his greatest investment was in a network of invisible eyes. Dozens of hidden high-definition cameras installed in every corner of the house. David's distrust was a cold, hard shield. He had fired 3 caregivers in 6 months, convinced they were either lazy or just after his money. His newest hire was Sarah, a woman in her late 40s with calloused hands and a quiet, unassuming demeanor. She didn't have the flashy credentials of the previous nurses, but Leo seemed less withdrawn when she was around. Still, David's suspicion never slept. He watched the live feeds from his office, looking for a slip-up, a sigh of frustration, or a moment of neglect. The conflict reached a boiling point one Tuesday evening. David was reviewing the footage from the afternoon when he saw Sarah doing something completely unauthorized. She wasn't in the living room doing Leo's physical therapy. Instead, she had wheeled Leo into the dark, dusty basement, a place David had forbidden anyone to enter because it was filled with the remnants of their life before the accident. David watched the screen, his jaw tightening. Sarah was rummaging through old crates, pulling out heavy equipment. "What is she doing?" David hissed, his heart racing with a mixture of anger and fear. He saw her set up a strange, bulky machine and connect it to a power source. To David, it looked like she was messing with expensive electronics, or, worse, putting Leo in danger. He stood up, ready to storm downstairs and fire her on the spot, but something in Leo's expression stopped him. For the first time in years, the boy's eyes weren't vacant. They were wide with an intense, flickering hope. David's hand was on the door handle, but his eyes remained glued to the monitor. He expected to see Sarah stealing or damaging property. Instead, he watched as she pulled an old, discarded flight simulator rig out from under a tarp, a gift David had bought for Leo months before the accident, which had been rotting in the basement ever since. Leo had once dreamed of being a pilot, a dream David had buried the day the doctors said he'd never walk again. But the twist wasn't just the machine. David watched as Sarah pulled out a pair of specialized, modified gloves from her own bag, tools she had clearly brought from home. She began to strap Leo's unresponsive hands into the gloves, which were connected to the flight stick. David realized with a jolt that Sarah hadn't just been a maid. She had spent her own time and money researching adaptive gaming for paralyzed children. As the simulator screen flickered to life, Sarah didn't stand over Leo like a guard. She knelt on the cold concrete floor, eye level with him. She wasn't taking care of him. She was coaching him. David watched as Sarah used her own hands to guide the mechanical gloves, helping Leo's stiff fingers grip the controls. The hidden camera captured a sound that bypassed David's speakers and went straight to his soul, the roar of a digital engine and Leo's shaky, breathless laugh. Sarah wasn't following a medical manual. She was breaking the rules to give a boy his wings back. David sank back into his chair, the anger drained out of him, replaced by a stinging, humbling shame. He had been watching for a crime, but he had witnessed a miracle. For the next hour, David couldn't look away. He watched Sarah patiently explain the physics of flight to Leo, her voice a soft murmur of encouragement. "The wind doesn't care if your legs don't move, Leo," she whispered on the recording. "Up there, everyone is equal." David saw his son's face transform. The bitterness that had defined Leo for 3 years vanished, replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated joy as the digital plane soared over a virtual mountain range. The emotional weight hit David when Sarah finally turned off the machine. Leo looked at his hands, still strapped into the adaptive gloves, and whispered, "I thought I was grounded forever." Sarah took his hands in hers, not with the clinical touch of a nurse, but with the tenderness of a mother, and replied, "Your body is just the vessel, Leo. Your spirit is the pilot." David felt tears blur his vision. He realized that in his obsession with protecting Leo, he had kept him in a different kind of prison. He had provided the best doctors, but Sarah had provided the one thing money couldn't buy, a reason to want to live. He realized his hidden cameras weren't protecting his son from Sarah. They were protecting David from the truth that he had given up on his son's happiness while a stranger had fought for it. He walked out of his office, not as a boss, but as a father who had finally seen the light. He met them in the hallway as they came up from the basement. Sarah looked startled, her face turning pale as she saw David, likely expecting to be scolded for being in the basement. "Sir, I can explain," Sarah began, her voice trembling slightly. Leo just needed to feel like he could go somewhere. David didn't let her finish. He stepped forward and, to her absolute shock, he didn't hand her a pink slip. Instead, he took her hand and shook it with a fervor he usually reserved for multi-million-dollar deals. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You did what I was too afraid to do. You gave him back his dream." Over the following months, the Sterling mansion underwent a radical transformation. The cameras were the first thing to go. David realized that trust was a more powerful security system than any lens. He turned the basement into a state-of-the-art adaptive learning center, not just for Leo, but for other children in the community who faced similar struggles. Sarah was no longer the maid. She became the director of the foundation David started in her honor. Leo didn't miraculously walk again, but he did something better. He thrived. He became a champion in adaptive esports, showing the world that his chair was just a seat, not a boundary. David learned the most valuable lesson of his life, that true protection isn't about watching over someone's every move. It's about empowering them to move on their own. He realized that kindness isn't always found in grand gestures. Sometimes it's found in a dusty basement, a modified pair of gloves, and a heart brave enough to see a pilot where the rest of the world saw a patient. As David watched Leo fly his simulator one sunny afternoon, he finally felt a sense of peace. He didn't need cameras anymore to know his son was safe. He could see it in Leo's smile, a light that no accident could ever truly extinguish.